I am a former newspaper journalist. I am the son of a newspaper journalist. I am in constant consciousness of how few people who have worked for British newspapers and who have ink in their blood have been open and honest about how awful their influence upon the body politic in this country has become. You may, on occasion, have heard me mention Paul Dacre, for example, the editor-in-chief of the Daily Mail. And I'm not talking about phone hacking now. I'm talking about the disgusting treatment of people like Dominic Grieve, who is my guest on Full Disclosure this week and who shared a story with me that I hadn't been aware of about what the Daily Mail did to him during that little period when they were calling democratically elected MPs saboteurs who must be crushed, and they were calling High Court judges enemies of the people, and they were attacking academic freedom and all manner of essential platforms of British democracy and British values. So there aren't many of us who slag off British newspapers, and that there certainly aren't many who've got a book out at the moment that goes into a lot of detail about how awful those newspapers have been. But that I'm mentioning all of that partly to plug the book, How They Broke Britain, at least 3 chapters on precisely the mess that British newspapers have inflicted upon the population. But there's one vote in already for an hour-long monologue. Keith, I've told you to stop texting the programme. I know how much you enjoy me speaking uninterrupted on a subject, but I don't know if it's fair upon everybody else. I also know that when phone hacking first became a phrase with which the British public was becoming familiar, you didn't really like talking about it. I mean, I should probably caveat that with the fact that the audience for this programme was about a fifth of the size of what it is now, but I don't think that's the point. There are lots of things that you can tell whether people are going to be talking about it or not. I'm also getting messages, my phone is pinging, from people either involved in or adjacent to a variety of the cases that are currently being talked about. 6 minutes after 12 is the time. But I think today is different, and I think it's about Prince Harry in the first instance rather than newspapers. And I think that if you are honest with yourself, you will now begin to understand why Prince Harry has come under such vitriolic and sustained attack from the most influential media outlets in this country. I think that many people who are decent members of the public, as opposed to this profession, must be realizing that they have been sold an almighty and hideous pup. Because that thing Evan Harris said there about newspapers writing articles about Prince Harry, people raging endlessly about Prince Harry and his wife without revealing that they were involved in or implicated in cases, court cases, allegations of criminal misdeeds that Prince Harry was bringing to court. Do you imagine if I weighed in on someone on this programme without mentioning to you that they were currently engaged in legal action that could see me in very, very serious trouble? Imagine all the times you've heard me be critical of, I don't know, Nadine Dorries, say, for being such an awful, awful politician and profoundly unpleasant human being. Imagine if I'd done all of that to you and then you found out that actually she was suing me for something that I had actually done. And I'd never mentioned it to you once. Or you know, I'd been a fully paid up member of an empire that was being sued by Prince Harry, either as a former executive or editor on the Daily Mirror or the News of the World or the Sun or whatever it had been. And I had been attacking this person without telling you that everybody in my contacts book, all of my former colleagues and friends, were absolutely terrified of where these cases might lead. So that today is a really, really important observation to make, I think. 8 minutes after 12 is the time. I don't know if I can do a phone in on the question of whether or not you would like to say sorry to Prince Harry. I'm quite tempted because the vitriol about social media, just following where legacy media has led, the vitriol has been extraordinary. And they were stealing his private information from his phone. The Mirror Group, can't say that about any of the other organisations that he is still involved in legal action against, but it is absolutely extraordinary, this result. And I resisted the urge to go in hard when it first dropped because, as I said, I needed a little bit of guidance and a little bit of counsel on on how big a deal it actually was. But I just want you to pause for a minute and think about the reason why they have been so horrible to him. Just think about it, because we've done phone-ins on that. We did it with Gary Lineker last week. Do you remember? So why does Gary Lineker boil, I think it was on Monday actually, boil the gaminy urine of this country in such a vicious and in such a violent way? Why does Gary Lineker annoy people so much? And the answer is very, very simply that he's a bloke with decent opinions, compassionate, humanitarian opinions that the right-wing media has successfully squeezed out of the public space almost completely. So someone with a big platform comes along and speaks up in favour of decency, humanity and compassion. It makes them feel ashamed and ugly and disgusting, and so they're desperate to silence him. Harry's that times 10. So you take that, times it by 10, because he is bringing the fight to their doorstep. And I do believe that an awful lot of the treatment that he's received over the last few years has been designed to try to persuade him to stop. I know that he believes this, to bully him into silence. If you think what you've been through so far is bad, you better just take a look at this. Oh, and by the way, nice wife you've got there. Be a shame if something happened to her. That's how bad it is. That is what they've done. That is what they've done. They have sought to dissuade him from pursuing these legal actions by showing him that things can get even worse than they were when, in the case of Mirror Group newspapers and allegedly other organisations, they were hacking his phone on a regular basis, stealing his private information. I'll tell you a story about another victim of phone hacking, and I don't think I can name them because I'm not sure what the precise situation was upon settlement. But I know for a fact that one famous woman believed that her own sister was selling stories about her to a newspaper. And the reason why she believed that her own sister was selling stories about her to a newspaper was that a newspaper published a story that only her sister knew about. Now, these were sisters who were tight and who were close, and it sent this famous woman, it almost sent her mad. Imagine that. Think of someone you really trust and love. Go on. Just think of them. Oh, that's sweet, Keith. Think of someone you really love and trust, okay? And you told them something, and you knew that you hadn't told anybody else. And then they left a message on your phone about it because they'd found out something or they had some useful advice for you, and they were getting on a plane or you didn't pick up or whatever it may have been. You left a message on their phone referencing this revelation, this deep, deep secret, this deep personal secret that you had spoken to nobody else about. And then you get a call from your agent or your publicist to say, I don't know how, but the Daily Bugle have got hold of a story, or they've just called me up to ask about a story that even your publicist didn't know about. That's how secret it was. You hadn't even given your publicist, this is how the industry works, you hadn't even given your publicist a heads up about something that you really didn't want to come out. Say a pregnancy, for example, or something like that. Even your publicist didn't know. So you cut your sister out of your life. You turned on your sister. What does the mum do? What do mum and dad do? When one daughter swears blind that the only way this story could have found its way into the newspapers was if my own sister betrayed me, and the other daughter swears blind that she would never in a million years tell a soul. But you've got Occam's razor kicking in. You've got the Sherlock Holmes principle, haven't you? There is the impossible has been eliminated, and whatever you are left with, however improbable, must be the truth. unless there's something that wouldn't have crossed anybody's mind at all. Because outside of Fleet Street, nobody knew about phone hacking. And so those sisters remained estranged and at loggerheads. That family remained fractured until the truth emerged, until the reality of phone hacking began to be reported, and until people were contacted privately to be told by lawyers and police officers, in some cases, that their phones had been hacked. And another story I have for you, which is absolutely breathtaking. And it involves a famous woman being spotted coming out of a gynecology clinic on Harley Street. This isn't phone hacking. This is another practice by which people unlawfully get hold of information. And that meant that to the person who was following this famous person around, that meant that there was obviously a story with a gynecological dimension. And an hour or three after that famous woman had left that clinic, somebody claiming to be her rang the clinic and asked for details of the test. A complete flyer. Hi, it's James. It's James. I was just wondering if you've got the results of the test that I did earlier. Except it's not James. It's someone completely different, and they get the results of the test, and it was a pregnancy test for a pregnancy that famous person wanted to terminate, and they obviously.
Prince Harry's victory against the British tabloids didn't just shake Fleet Street, it detonated it. Like a royal-sized earthquake that rattled every newsroom from the Daily Mail to the Sun. Suddenly, the same folks who spent years calling him fragile, sensitive, or delusional are now sweating harder than an editor caught deleting old emails before a police raid. Let's be real. The British press has spent decades pretending to be the nation's moral compass, while secretly being more crooked than a palace chandelier. They print words like truth, freedom, and integrity on the front page, but behind the scenes it's all phone hacking, backstabbing, and good old-fashioned hypocrisy. And now, thanks to Prince Harry, the dirty laundry is finally being aired. You can practically hear the sound of shredded documents echoing down Fleet Street. What Harry did was historic. This man looked the most powerful media corporations straight in the eye and said, "You don't get to ruin people's lives anymore." And what did the tabloids do in return? They panicked. They started cranking out, "Harry is obsessed," and Meghan is manipulating him. Headlines faster than you can say, "royal meltdown." But here's the truth. Harry isn't obsessed with the media. He's exposing it. There's a difference between obsession and holding the most unethical press industry on earth accountable for its crimes. Remember, these are the same newspapers that literally hacked phones. Not hypothetically, literally. They listened to private voicemails, read messages, and then published the juiciest bits like gossip vultures circling a scandal buffet. And somehow, when Harry fought back, he became the villain. Make it make sense. One journalist recently admitted that during the height of the phone hacking era, editors were calling judges enemies of the people and elected MPs traitors. Sound familiar? That's the same energy they've used against Harry and Meghan Sussex. Twist the truth, gaslight the public, and attack anyone with a conscience until the audience can't tell who's the hero and who's the villain. Except this time their victim fought back and won. Let's not forget, while Harry was taking these media giants to court, many of the very journalists criticizing him conveniently forgot to mention that they either worked for or were connected to the companies he was suing. That's not journalism. That's self-preservation disguised as commentary. Imagine a burglar writing a police report on his own crime and then getting paid for it. That's the British media for you. But here's what's really sickening. This hasn't just been about headlines, it's been psychological warfare. They went after Harry's wife, Meghan Sussex, calling her every name in the dictionary, and then inventing a few new ones when they ran out. They attacked his kids. They even dragged his late mother's memory back into the mud just to twist the knife a little deeper. Why? Because Harry represents something they can't control: integrity. He's proof that you can walk away from that toxic institution of lies and manipulation and still have a voice louder than all of them combined. And oh, how that terrifies them. The tabloids loved Harry when he was a party prince in a uniform they could glamorize. But the moment he started speaking truth, they turned on him faster than you can say exclusive royal sauce. Suddenly, the compassionate, self-aware veteran became public enemy number one. Let's not kid ourselves. This isn't about protecting journalism. This is about protecting power. The same power that allowed tabloids to hack the phones of grieving families, ruin marriages, and destroy reputations, all for a few extra pounds and a bigger headline. One journalist told a chilling story. A famous woman once thought her own sister had betrayed her by leaking private information to the press, only to find out years later that her phone had been hacked. Imagine that. Families torn apart, friendships destroyed, all because the tabloids couldn't respect basic human decency. Now multiply that pain by 1,000, and you'll start to understand what Harry and Meghan Sussex have been up against. But the beauty of this whole saga is that truth always wins. Harry didn't back down, even when the tabloids tried to gaslight the nation into thinking he was unstable. He stayed calm, collected, and relentless, proving that courage isn't about fighting with fists, it's about fighting with facts. And guess what? The facts are finally catching up with the fiction. The media can't stand it. They're losing their grip. They're losing their ability to manipulate the narrative. For decades, the British tabloids controlled what people thought about the royal family. They decided who was the hero and who was the villain. But thanks to Harry and Meghan Sussex, that spell is breaking. Now people are asking questions, hard ones. Who gave them the right to invade lives under the excuse of freedom of the press? When did bullying become journalism? And why does the British media go into a full-blown meltdown every time Harry or Meghan dares to smile, breathe, or exist? Because every time they do, it reminds the press of what real freedom looks like. Freedom to live without fear, to speak without manipulation, and to love without approval from tabloids or palaces. Harry's battle isn't just about him. It's about justice for every person who's been targeted, humiliated, or lied about by the same industry that calls itself the moral voice of Britain. And make no mistake, this fight isn't over. He's just getting started. So here's the message to the tabloids: keep underestimating him. Keep printing your Harry is crazy stories, because every time you do, you only prove his point, and you make the rest of us even more eager to hear what he says next. And to all the fans watching right now, if you believe in truth over gossip, in compassion over cruelty, and in accountability over power, then you're already part of the movement Harry started. The British tabloids may have built their empire on lies, but the truth, it's coming for them, one headline at a time. So, what do you think? Are we finally seeing justice catch up to the British media, or are we just watching the opening act of an even bigger reckoning? Drop your thoughts below. I'd love to hear from you. And hey, if you're tired of media hypocrisy, if you stand with Harry and Meghan Sussex, and if you believe their story deserves to be told honestly, make sure you hit that subscribe button and join us here on Sussex Unfiltered. Because over here we tell it like it is, unfiltered, unapologetic, and powered by truth.